people.
Yeah, I think you're doing a fantastic job at that. And one video that comes to mind for me was after the Bondi attacks, the massacre at Bondi where 20 people were injured and 6 people were killed. So the video was about your brother who suffered from mental health illnesses and how he was let down by the government and the system who have failed to sort of give him treatment and how you tie that back to the
Bondi,
The Bondi, yeah. So I'd love for you to elaborate on that.
So basically, like going back, I guess why I touched on all that stuff in the early part where how I grew up and my stability of my family and whatnot. That story about my brother is one story of a mental health system failing me and my family. So my whole family is riddled with that sort of stuff. It's just been like a part of our life for as long as I can remember. And it's been a massive challenge for myself as someone who's been, I guess, like the support network in my family is trying to get these people help. But basically what happened was when the Bondi thing happened, it was horrible and it was absolutely disgusting what that guy did and whatever. But there was a video of the dad crying about his son, right? So and as I think about it now, it's like it brings emotion to me. But he was like, he would never do this if he was in his right mind. He was so devastated, his dad. And that dad was me. Yeah, like so I was looked at and I'm like, that's me when I'm dealing with my family and going through this stuff. It's like I know that this is not who they are. They're sick. If that makes sense. And it's devastating because you can't get them help. Like as much as you try, and they can't help themselves. But everyone sort of says, like, well, that's that person's fault because they're crazy or whatever. But it's like that guy was not right. He was mentally ill, and I believe a lot of people might be upset with this. A lot of people weren't though. Like most people supported what I said. But what I said was, this thing was disgusting and it was absolutely horrible for what happened, but it probably could have been prevented because this guy was mentally ill for years and years and years and years. He had been failed by what I would say is our system, where they continue to let him go. Yeah, so he'd had incidents where he'd done creepy things and done weird things, and they knew he was psychotic. They knew he wasn't on medication. He traveled interstate without like people really knowing. There was all these different things, and I'm like, that guy's locked up involuntary for argument's sake, or he's forced to have his medication. Does that happen? I don't believe so. Like that's my personal opinion. And then with these things of going up around with people with schizophrenia and psychosis and all sort of stuff, is that a lot of the time when they do something, not using this one as an example, but like in general, like when there is an incident, say they like stab a family member or they do whatever. And again, I know people in my family network that have had this happen where they've like a family member stabbed his wife because he thought that she was a demon. Yeah, like so he wasn't stabbing her because he disliked her, or he wasn't stabbing her because of whatever. He was having hallucinations. Yeah, and so. And what happens in the Australian government, I don't know when it changed or what happened, but they just don't allow you. So like using examples of my mum and my brother, I'll probably go into like, might be interesting to talk about like what they were, like the delusions that they have. So my mum, she was obviously on and off drugs forever, but what she dealt with was mental health. So she had no doubt in my mind, she dealt with PTSD in a previous thing. I think there was some sexual abuse stuff that had happened from like a mailman or something like that in the early days, which I know is pretty heavy. So trigger warning to anyone that hears that. And that definitely, and then the death of my brother and all these different things compounding created PTSD, which turned into drugs, right? Then because of that, during that process, then she started to have serious mental health problems. And then as she went on and on and on, she started to become delusional from the age of maybe I was like 18. So my stepfather, which is again really deep, hopefully you're okay with this, but he killed himself. So he killed himself when he was 19. And he also was delusional. So he thought that the FBI was tapping our family home. He thought that my father was trying to kill him. He thought that these people connected to bikie organizations, and he wouldn't sleep for days at a time. He would do drugs sometimes because he was scared to sleep because he thought people were going to come rob the house and he was trying to protect us. He thought there was bugs in the house, all this different stuff. And then eventually got too much for him, and he thought that he was the reason why people were trying to get the family. And he actually went and killed himself because he believed that he was doing us a favor in a sense, which was the complete opposite of what happened. But basically he did that because he, again, was not mentally well. And we took him to mental hospitals, and we took him to hospitals, and we took him to doctors and psychiatrists. And what they would do is they would allow him to check out, and they would allow him not to be medicated, and they would allow him to not have, there was all these rehab juggles that I'll go through when I go to my brother part, and they would do all these things, and we were just not able to get help as like just functioning family members, myself and my sister. We weren't able to get him help, and my mum was not in a good position either. So she was sort of like encouraging him out. We lost him. So that was the first part of that journey. The second journey is my mum goes into it. So my mum was very much like different to his, but her paranoia was like, she believed there was always like, there was a puzzle she was trying to put together that never existed. So she was always like on and off. It would get bad and worse, but she thought like she could read people's minds. She thought that God was talking to her. She would like read the Bible, and then she thought I was Jesus for a point in time. She thought my daughters were the second coming. She would think that the world was going to end because she'd found clues in books or whatever. She would just put puzzles together, and then we'd have to go to places. So I'd get calls like 11 p.m. at night. My mum would be like, you know, we need to go to Lake Huron because that's when the flood comes. Is going to be the place protected. I've figured it out, this encyclopedia, right? Or she thought that she had like glass traveling through her body from an accident that she had when she was like 25. So she always had these weird things going through her mind. And again, she'd go missing. So my mum would be homeless at times. So she'd go missing. She lived in government housing, like commissioned housing. And then my mum I'd go to like go check on her and she'd be gone. And her house was like, it's hard to explain, but there'd be trash piled up. So she would go out when she was crazy. She would go collect rubbish, and then she would just bring it home. So like she was like a trolley lady, and she'd actually been in a fire, so she lit herself a light at one point. So she sort of had like burns all over her body. So she would walk around with the trolley, and she was like this crazy lady in Clayton, which is so wild because people knew me but didn't know that that was my mum.
Really?
So when people would say that was my mum, they're like, wow. And there's something I will go into afterwards, which is relatively interesting to kind of, I guess, bridge the gap of like how I was living in a house with a pool and my mum was living in commission housing and wandering around the streets with a trolley. But she would go missing, and then we'd get her into places. So we'd get her into like mental hospitals or rehabs or whatever, and they would just let her out again. So like this is the thing, like we'd get her in there and she'd be like delusional. So she'd lit herself on fire, you know, like, or blew herself up, and then we'd put her into a hospital. And then there's like 24, 48 hours when they allow them to stay. Like they can't not stay. But as over 18 years old, they're allowed to check themselves out afterwards. So when they're fucking delusional, they're smart, they're crafty. So she would be like, no, I'm fine now. I'm not hearing voices and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And they would let her out. But she would not be good. And then I'd be wandering around the street at 9 p.m. at night trying to find my mum, like in fucking suburbs, I don't know where she was, because they let her out. I'm like, why did you not tell us? But they don't even have an authority to like call you and say, hey, your mum's left. Like,
really?
So yeah, it's just, they just don't, it's not, I don't want to blame the psychiatrist, or I don't want to blame the psych nurses. It's the actual head of the government that's allowing these rules to happen, because it's all to do with like, you know, human rights and stuff. Because I think back in the 70s, they didn't do that. Like people were getting locked up, people were just troublesome or had ADHD, and the backside of that now is like there's almost too much freedom. So you're not able to like take over someone. And the other thing too is when someone's not in right mind, they allow them to make the decision, but at the same time, like you can't sort of take over their like basically their own will. You can't just like, you know, you have to do this, you have to do this. There's no rule. And I don't know the answer. So I'm not here to say that I know the answer. This is just my experience in the situation I've been in. But yeah, the other thing I was going to go into before I go into my brother, this is like a long-winded answer, but he, my mum, so even though everyone was like, well, why don't you bring your mum to live with you, or why don't you do this or whatever? And I couldn't. And I know this sounds like maybe like a cop out to some people, but I was trying to better my life. I was trying to change the way I live. I had my own daughters who don't even know anything about this stuff in my life that I've gone through. My wife that had, you know, lived a complete different life to me, went to private schools and had all the opportunity in the world. That's how I want my family to be. Then my life has been the complete opposite of that. It's chaos is probably a word that's too light for what I've lived and experienced. But the thing with my mum was she was a drug addict. So she would come to my house and she would steal my Panadol. Yeah, like she would take all my drugs. She would wander in the house all night. She would, there was risk of people robbing us. Like, so people would do run-throughs. They would break through our house because she'd owe drug dealers money and take stuff. So I couldn't put my own family at risk in exchange for my mum. And like, so I had to do a part where, you know, I'd take my mum to the doctors because at the point she had HIV at the end of her life. I'd take her to the doctors, go get her food. I would deliver stuff to her. Couldn't give her money because she would spend it on drugs or whatnot. So I'd buy her tablets that she needed to have. I did all those things I possibly could, but I kept my family and her separated because I knew she was going to eventually pass away, which she did, which is super sad. But then my brother, he inherited the bad side. So I guess my life, I took it, kind of twisted this chaos into normality and success. But my brother wasn't as lucky. And then he had his own battles with mental health, and his stuff was even crazier. So TV was talking to him. He thought that he was going to become Santa Claus. But what was different with him in the story that you're talking about, which lies back to the Bondi thing, was he hurt himself twice and they didn't contact us or anybody and they let him go. So in short, the story was, I didn't know. Like I kind of knew it was a bit off. And it's one of these things when you go through trauma, which is sort of hard to understand, but it's easy to ignore it sometimes and it is to like accept it because then you got to dive back into your own traumas. And for someone who myself is trying to like repave the way of how I grew up and how I lived, it's sometimes difficult. You know, like I don't want to. Like when something bad happens, I go fix it, but I don't want to live in that pass because it's fucking depressing. Like for the short term of it, and it's like, but I have to, unfortunately. I've got to, pull my big boy pants on and go back and puddle in the mud for a little bit. But I sort of knew there was something going on, but I didn't know fully what was going on, and I was sort of ignoring it. But my brother was sort of starting to dress more eclectic, I'd say. So by the end of it, he was like dressed like a wizard. He was walking around with a cane, had like rings on, and he would have like dangling earrings, which is a really common thing for someone who's really struggling with mental health. They sort of start to think that these items have powers and stuff like that.
Really?
So my brother is very kind, not a violent person or anything like that. So a lot of his stuff is childlike, and maybe it's the way that he dealt with stuff as a child. But he'll sort of like regress with toys and things. Like he'll play with toys and he'll do dress ups, and it's like it's kind of like that's what he has his mental health breaks. He actually sort of goes back to like a 12-year-old boy, so I sort of started to see that. He's always been a bit eccentric anyway, but I started to see more and more of that. And then I'd asked him a few times like what was going on. He didn't really give me an answer. And then it came to a day where he called me, and it's like actually going to upset me, which I didn't think it would. But he called me and he was like, help, help, help. He was screaming, and I was like, my heart sank because I was like, fuck, I know what's happening, right? So what I did, because I've been let down by the system so much, is I called the police. So I called the police straight away because I was like, I need to make this as drastic as possible. Otherwise, I'm going to lose my brother. So I've lost my mum, my stepdad. He was with my mum from the age of 4. I'm not losing him. So I basically called the police and I said, hey, my brother has weapons in his house. He's being violent. You need to go there right now because he's going to hurt someone and he's going through a mental health episode. So I'm driving 106 kilometers down the freeway. I'm fucking like, I hope I can save him this time. So I'm driving down there. And then I pull up and there's 3 cop cars. I go up and he's petrified because he's petrified of police. Like most people in these situations with mental health, they're scared. Like that's what they are. Like everything they're doing that's weird and strange, a lot of it is to do with how fucking scared they are, right? So there's like fight or flight. And like that's when you see them do these really bad things. It's like fight. And then majority of the time they flight, or I guess it's a personality trait or whatever. But if you get someone who's sick that has a fight mentality, that's when they're really dangerous. But mostly my brother's a flighter. But in saying that, that's not to say that he never would become a fighter, like because it's there in these weird things. So I get there, and the police are there, and I sort of explain to them what's going on. I sort of say, they're like, well, yeah, he does have an axe in his room or whatever, but has he threatened anybody? And I was hoping to get there and say that he had. Like my actual plan was to say that he threatened me with an axe because I knew that they would actually do something. And then they were like, look, we can tell he's scared. It's obviously not right, but there's not much we can do. And like they were very, very sympathetic to me, the police. They were like, they were almost upset, and they could see how distraught I was about it. And then we called the CAT team, which is, do you know what that is?
No.
So there's like, when you have like an emergency mental health problem or issue, there's a team you can call the CAT team. So they're the ones who can do these 48 involuntary things. So they will normally come and they can take someone. So if there's a really bad situation like what's going on here, they can take this person and they can lock them up for a certain amount of time. But then this is when the system fails because they're able to leave afterwards. So there is like a really quick turnaround sort of situation that does happen, but I think it's flawed. But so then for whatever reason, I don't know why, but the CAT team, I tried to get them to come, but they didn't. So we ended up having a phone consult with the fucking CAT team. And then they were like, oh, the best we can do is offer you an Uber charge to the mental health emergency service place. And then, so I didn't go into it. So the thing that pissed me off was I found out my brother had been in hospital 2 weeks in a row. So the first time he thought he was invincible. And he decided to prove to everybody he was invincible by burning his hands. So he turned on like one of those coil ovens.
Yep.
And he was like saying to his friend and his partner, I'm still his partner now, but his partner, he was like, look, I'm invincible. And they're like, you're not invincible. Like you're not. And he's like, I am. I've got superpowers. I've got this. I've got whatever. And he's put his hand down onto the fire, and he's 3rd-degree burned his whole hand. So he's gone into hospital and had to get plastic surgery and all this sort of stuff. And he was in there for like 4 or 5 days, like under sedation and whatever. They clearly knew that he was having mental health issues. Like he told them that he burned his hand because he thought he was invincible. And they did nothing. So they allowed him to get through. They wrapped him up. They did whatever. They got rid of him. They didn't call me, my nan. They didn't call my sister. None of us knew. His girlfriend at the time, she didn't tell us because he was sort of telling her not to, I guess, because he was living in his state of paranoia or whatever. Yeah. And so he's gone through there, and all they did was give him a card saying, you can book a psychology appointment. So then he's gone off and done that, and then he has gone back again. So he swallowed a coin. So he thought he was under a curse, and he thought this curse was like going to break if he swallowed this coin because the TV was telling him this, like all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So he swallowed a coin and he almost choked on it and could have died again. So it's 2 times in a row that he could have died. He didn't, thank God. And then by the time I've got to him, he's called me to like sort of, you know, get help. And he's gone, and I find out he's gone to hospital twice, and they just keep giving him this card saying, "Hey, go get 10 mental health appointment like sessions." Right. Take him to the emergency department, and I'm sort of sitting there, and I'm like, you know, we wait there, and they take him into this like a mental health emergency ward, and I'm like, cool, it's all good. So he's like saying, I don't want to stay here, but I'm like, in my head, I'm not letting you go. So I'm sitting in this little box thing with him. And he's telling me all kinds of stuff. He's telling me like, you know, that his Santa Claus lives across the road from him, that my grandpa's talking to him on the TV, that the night before he'd been locked out of his house because there's a gnome that lives there that has sex with his cat, that their voices are telling him to go into this tunnel next to his house, like all these super dangerous things, right? Like they could have been potentially dangerous. Right. So he's thinking all this stuff and he's saying to me normally, and like it kind of sounds weird, but when you're in these situations, because I know so well what to do, I'm not saying, hey, Dale, this is not true. This is not whatever. I'm actually going, oh, really? Oh, really? Because I'm trying to make him present as crazy as possible because I want them to see how serious this is to potentially keep him in. So despite that, I did not get that. So I waited for 4 hours and then they came in and they were like, you know, the psychiatrist is going to come, blah, 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 blah. And I was begging, like I'm talking like physically like saying, hey, please, can you please let my brother stay here? Like he's almost killed himself twice accidentally. You need to help me here. Like I can't let this happen again. Like I've lost my family members. He's going to be the third in the puzzle, the piece, the part. I'm like, you need to like come to the party on this one. And she's like, there's nothing we can do. Like that's what she was actually saying to me. And then the psychiatrist came in and they're like, look, he's probably going to stay overnight. And I'm thinking, yes, awesome, like great. Comes back an hour later and they say, well, because you're here with him, you can just take him home because they don't have the beds. So you've got a kid that's been into hospital twice because he's done things that are effectively, you know, completely delusional. Yeah. Is in a position where they're now saying to him, well, here's 2 Valium and send him home and watch him sleep. So my brother's on 7-day watch because we're like watching him sleep the whole time because we're just so worried about what's going to happen. And we just can't get any support from them. And then again, they give us a card to call. So I call on Sunday, it's closed. Lucky for me, I've got a great network. So I sort of started to spread and look for support and look for help. A guy used to work for me, became a psychologist, and he bumped me into the system. This is probably the only win I had. So it only took 4 days to get him to a psychiatrist to get him medicated with antipsychotics. But if that wasn't the case, and I didn't know that guy, it would have took 5 weeks. And that's the quickest process of the whole thing. Yeah. So the drug and alcohol counseling stuff, the psychiatrist, the 10 mental health plans with the psychology, any sort of form of support, there's a 6 to 7 week lead time. So you're talking about a guy who's burning his hand because he thinks he's invincible and he's in hospital talking about, you know, TV's talking to him and they're like, oh, okay, cool, just hang on for another 6 weeks. And then that's why I was so angry, and you can tell now I'm still the same. It's like, well, okay, what happens if my brother, who's the most nicest, loving human, harmless as shit person, gets more and more delusional and does something to me or his neighbor or whatever because his delusion gets so bad because he's waiting for that 6 week process to get in. Yeah. It's like, that's where I guess I was angry about this thing because I'm like, I don't know that guy's story, so I'm not here to sort of defend or even relate it to what I'm saying. But it's like I could see that being me. You know, I could see me being that dad where I'm watching this fucking horrible thing happen that is absolutely atrocious, and it's my brother. You know, like or someone that I loved or someone I knew, and I'm sitting there going, crying my eyes out, and I'm now being TV shoved in my face, being like, why is this person a monster? And I'm like, he's not a fucking monster. I couldn't get fucking help. Like, I'm helpless, yeah? Like, so, I mean, like, that's how I felt when I was there. And then I know it was traumatic to others because I had that video's, you know, getting close to 1 million views. And the amount of people do, I'll be like eating lunch or walking around a market or at the airport and people walk up and they're just like, they literally touch my arm and just be like, I've been there too. Yeah, and like, or, you know, your story showed me I'm not alone. And it made me not feel alone, but
and they voiced the same frustration.
Exactly the same frustration. And I'm just like, this is so fucked. And like, I don't know the answer. Like, that's a weird part. Like, now I've got social media. People want to hear what I've got to say. But I'm like, hey, I'm don't know. You know, like, all I'm saying this is flawed. I'm trying to put like a spotlight on it. Yeah. Help us. Like, that's what I'm sort of saying. Like, help us. But he, even though there was another one too. So my brother, the other one too, this is the thing too, where people will look at it and go, well, mental health, you say mental health and like, they'll be like, was he on drugs? Was he on drugs? And it's like, almost like, okay, well, if he's done drugs, then he deserves it or some shit. Like, and what people don't understand with this dude is like, drugs feed people with mental health because like it's sort of, a lot of them have PTSD or trauma or whatnot, and they're trying to escape. and then those drugs help them escape to a point that they then get mentally ill. So the idea that if someone does drugs and it's their fault that they're mentally ill, it's just so backwards. And like in my opinion, it's like first world. It's like, like I live this privileged life, so that person smokes ice, so therefore he's insane. So it's his fault that he did these crazy things. It's like that doesn't make sense, because the reason why that person smoked ice is maybe because something really bad happened to him traumatically when he was younger and he can't deal with it, or he didn't have love or like a good family home. So this is how he sort of gets away from those bad and mutual feelings, and now he's in this situation. I'm like, it's so much deeper than that, and I hate that. Like first class, I'm better than everybody else. If you do drugs, then you deserve anything that happens to you. It's like, why are these people doing drugs in the first place? Like I'm a happy guy. I don't do drugs. And it's like the reason why I don't do drugs is because I'm fucking happy.
You're regulated.
But everybody I know who does do drugs aren't happy. So there's a reason why people do them. So I just hate that thought process. I'm now like almost ranting, I guess.
No, it's good, man. Yeah, extremely well said.
Yeah, it just pisses me off. Like, and then so yes, he was on drugs. Like that's the answer. And he was on drugs because he lost his fucking dad to suicide, where our mum was not around. House was getting robbed. Like he was living in commission houses. Like he didn't know any better. So to sort of say, he deserved to almost die twice and not be helped by the system because he did ice. It's like, well, why the fuck was he doing ice in the first place? It was because we grew up in this shit life. So it's like, go back again. At what support level does someone step in and sort of help us out or do whatever it is? There's millions of different probably spots I can see as I talk about this that like maybe prevents that from happening.
Yeah.
So it's like, or maybe prevents that from going there. And yes, obviously there's self-accountability. Don't get me wrong. My brother's now been sober for a year. I'm amazing. I could not be more proud of my brother. But it's like at the same time, it's like he got his own challenges and his battles and demons that he has to deal with that not everybody has the ability to be able to do it like I have. But in saying that, I still see a psychologist often. Like I still do mental health stuff and check in with myself all the time. Like I'm not Superman either. So you have to do these things, but I just hate that like look down on you. Like,
the first step needs to be compassion for people while they're doing drugs and their story and what they've gone through.
Yeah, and it just really, really sucks. And I guess for me, I now got a platform where people are looking at me as this successful guy, and like I'm an entrepreneur who's got businesses, and I've got the life that people want to live. And I'm like, hey, this is where I come from. This is how I lived, and now I can talk because you want to listen to me. So now I'm going to talk about this. That's how I feel, and I want to continue to do this. So like that's when you asked me to come on. I was super stoked to really go into this point because I'm fucking passionate about it, and why people are listening to me, like help us. Like that's how we look at. But the thing with my brother with that thing was, so we couldn't get him into a mental hospital because he had ice in his system. We couldn't get him into a rehab because he had mental health problems. So we couldn't. They couldn't take care of one another. We couldn't keep him in the emergency because they didn't have the beds. So it's like that 7 days might not seem like a lot, or like 14 days or whatever it ends up being. But it's like it's a lifetime when you're dealing with someone who's like a potential risk to themselves. Like so, I hope I don't lose my brother, man. Like I fucking love him to death, and it's hard to watch, but I just don't know. I've just been failed by the system, and I've been failed by life when it comes to my personal life so many times that I'd say that. I almost expect the worst a lot of the time, And so, and I don't. I wish I knew the answer. I don't. But all I can do is bring it up so that people can either relate with me and feel not alone, or second to that, they can, there's a conversation that begins where people can sort of start to go, hey, this is not working. How can we make it work?
That's it. Yeah. And it's amazing that your brother has you as such good support.
Yeah.
But for the people who don't, you can just
even that, man. Like this one thing I say, and like a lot of people will say, fuck that, what you just said to me, but I'm like. I ignore my brother for a little bit when he was eclectic, and so I've got my own guilt where I'm like, I've got my life that I'm sitting overside, but sometimes I wish I could do more for him. So yes, I did help him through that. So did my sister. Like credit to her too. I love my sister to death too, but it's like I feel bad about saying it, but I wish I did more. Like I actually feel the opposite. I don't feel proud of how I acted and what I did. I feel like I wish I did more, but it's hard when you got your own dramas and
and also you have to protect your family as well, and
and yourself, because I can't be better. I can't be better for my brother and my sister and my family if I'm not better. That makes sense. So I wasn't expecting that reaction.
No, it's good, man. Like you said, there might not be any obvious answers, but to shine a light on it and just create that discourse is so important. Yeah,
for sure. And like I don't mean like at least I don't know, you can talk. It's like guys like Spanian. This is such a weird off-topic thing, but no one talks about those kids that lived in those areas, and they're the areas that I lived in, and that's how I grew up. And it's weird that he's showcasing them, good or bad. Like if you agree or disagree with what he's doing, but. No one wanted to talk about that. They wanted to talk about Bondi Rescue. And like they want to talk about home and away. It's like, well, where the fuck are those areas? And like where the kids like me that grew up in these things, like we're now getting a voice because of places like TikTok and Instagram. There's all these different people and that would never have ever been in social media or spotlight because, you know, like they didn't fit the mold of traditional TV or they couldn't be casted because they might have had, you know, a spot in their name or they didn't talk or they swore too much or whatever. It's like, I'm loving watching this world kind of open up because now you can hear my story. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be cut up on a 15 minutes fucking current affair episode.
Yeah.
And then regulated by producers or whatever. It's like, you can go watch someone walk through these areas and watch how these people are living and like what's going on and kind of question. But even then on those things, like you see these comments, like, you know, people just blaming these people, but like, why are they there? You know, what happened? What happened to them, those people? It's like, I got out of it, man, but I'm one of fucking a small minority that get out of these situations. Like they get out of this cycle of commission and drugs and alcohol. It's like I know more people who went to jail sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's a lie from different places I live. But I know more people who went to jail from where I grew up than went on to be successful business people, entrepreneurs. Yeah, like I know I've got multiple mates that have died from drug overdoses and all these sort of things. It's like, then I know people that have like, you know, gone on to become millionaires. Like I do now because I've gone and I'm now and hanging around with these guys because I've sort of built a life for myself, but not from where I come from. You know, like so to break that mold is very, very hard. And I'm so fucking thankful that I was able to do it because I was delusional enough to believe that I could. Yeah. And and I hope that there's some kids out there that listen to this and think I can, yeah. Like it is possible. I can break my cycle, or maybe there's a kid in a cycle that doesn't even know they're in it and sees my story and thinks, fuck, you know, well, maybe this is the way I want to go. So hopefully they can, and you don't have to do the traditional method of just going to the mines or doing something boring. You can still do something you love and be passionate about and get out of your shitty situation. But you're going to have scars, and like I have scars. You can tell I was just talking and I started to break down, you know, like I've got plenty of scars that I have to carry with me, but it's got to be better day by day.
I think